impasse between the United States regime and the Venezuelan government shows signs of de-escalation. Richard Grenell is special presidential envoy to Venezuela and North Korea, and he has been recorded on recent CPAC summit in Paraguay proposing a peaceful diplomatic solution to the United States-Venezuela impasse. He clarifies that all United States presidents count with two conflicting departments, the War Department and the Pentagon, who are prepared for war, against the Peace Department, which is supposed to be the Department of State, which prefers measures such as sanctions, isolation, or tariffs. Unfortunately, such peace strategies often used by the state or peace department are also forms of war, such as economic warfare or psychological warfare. Once Richard Grenell comes into Venezuelan soil for his peacemaking meeting with President Nicolás Maduro, other State Department strategies beyond sanctions, tariffs, or isolation should be proposed in order for Venezuelans to provide some credibility, which is at an all-time low. Venezuela remains sympathetic to the state of Qatar, who was supposed to be an ally of the United States and who has spent enormous amount of money on expensive warfare equipment, which did not work against Israel aggression. Other tools that United States could use against Venezuela are intercepting petroleum vessels holding petroleum or naval blockade. None of those punitive measures are appreciated by Venezuela, or for that matter, Iran, China, India, Russia, who have increasingly become self-sufficient in trading, circumventing such hostile United States postures. It looks like the United States, both at the Department of War and at the Department of State or at the Department of Peace, are increasing repudiation of the international community against the United States, because the United States has nothing good to offer. There are no cultural benefits of trading with the United States. There are no economic benefits of trading with the United States because of tariffs. And there are no public relations advantages of trading with the United States, as any Latin American country that becomes too close with the United States will follow a backlash from sovereign-oriented Caribbean and Latin American countries determined to retain our independence. However, it will be useful that Richard Grenell comes to Venezuela and starts dialoguing with Nicolás Maduro and the rest of the Venezuelan government, because indeed Venezuela would be interested in suggesting the United States to remove their navy out of Caribbean waters, as Venezuelans would like to continue promoting the Caribbean sphere of influence as a sphere of influence of peace. Minister of the Interior and Justice of Venezuela, Captain Diosdado Cabello, showed today a military operation of Venezuelan authorities capturing a boat that was transporting 4 tons of cocaine, and it had lots of gasoline for a long-term trip. The GPS tools that were on that boat showed that the boat came from Guajira Peninsula in Colombia, and the route went immediately into Venezuelan domestic waters, came close to Paraguay Peninsula in Falcon State, and was later interrupted in the vicinity of Morrocoy National Park on central coast Venezuelan waters. It is likely that this was meant to be a false positive of transporting all of those drugs into the United States so that it could be later intercepted by the hostile United States military ships and show to the world that the persons on board were Venezuelans. It is significant that they were carrying their Venezuelan national identity cards when it has recently been suggested to all fishermen not to carry their Venezuelan national identification cards with them when they are fishing on the sea, precisely to avoid such kinds of interception, because we are very clear that the United States is urged to find cases of drugs coming from Venezuela to continue their regime change design. It is also significant that Colombian President Gustavo Petro has been decertified in drug trafficking, in anti-narcotics trafficking charges. As a result, the Republic of Colombia will no longer receive military and financial assistance for counter-narcotics operations. President Gustavo Petro welcomed the decision as it will provide better chances for Colombia to redefine their sovereign options of military alliances and procedures for removing the drug trade. Venezuela had an agreement with the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States, until the year 2007, when former President Hugo Chavez expelled the DEA from Venezuelan jurisdiction, and as a result, Venezuelan counter-narcotics seizures increased rather than decreased. It sounds like the DEA is in close contact with drug cartels in the United States, which are authorized to distribute all kinds of drugs into drug addict United States American population, as the drug trade and the military are huge chunks of the United States economy. However, war against drugs seems confined to Venezuela, which doesn't produce anything and only transports a little bit, rather than the huge cartels that distributes drugs inside the United States. A report from the European Community shows that massive cargoes of dozens of tons of cocaine come from plantain exports from Guayaquil, Ecuador, whose president is President Noboa, a close ally of the United States. And it is significant that Colombia has several United States military bases in Colombian territory, and Colombia still produces the largest percentage of cocaine in the whole planet. So the United States has been unsuccessful in eradicating the coca trade in Colombia. And as President Petro tries to unify forces with President Maduro of Venezuela to decrease production and distribution of drugs among the territories of Colombia and Venezuela, the United States chooses to decertify Colombia. Regime change narrative is once again dismissed by Special Envoy Richard Grenell, who insists in his capabilities of resolving this impasse through peaceful means via in-person meetings with Nicolás Maduro, which should be scheduled by Donald Trump in the near future once Marco Rubio gets out of the way. Even though Richard Grenell stated in CPAC conference in Paraguay that Marco Rubio is paying attention to Latin America and the Caribbean, Richard Grenell failed to mention that Marco Rubio's emphasis on providing carrots to drug trafficking countries, friends of the United States, while providing the stick to drug fighting countries in Latin America, such as Venezuela, is not providing any results as the international community continues horrified with violations of human rights of several boats that have been shot down by United States military. And the Association of Fishermen of Trinidad and Tobago have also stressed out that Prime Minister Kamla is not taking care of the plight of Trinidad and Tobago fishermen who no longer feel safe at sea because they can be shot down by the United States military as if they were criminals. Which in fact, you are not supposed to shoot down a criminal. You are supposed to arrest criminals, provide them the opportunity to present legal defense, and process them through the judicial jurisdiction of the country that made the arrest. Everything according to international law. The seizure of the Colombian boat with Venezuelan occupants who were transporting 4 tons of drugs were actually arrested following standard protocol procedures, such as telling them to halt many times and transferring them to the judicial authorities following the rule of law. Richard Grenell will have very hard conversations with Nicolás Maduro because the case of the United States lacks evidence and features several deficiencies in strict following of international law. Venezuela, however, could be interested in the entrance into the country's economy of oil companies beyond Chevron. Perhaps other petroleum companies of the United States will be interested in developing Venezuelan resources, and if they agree to Venezuela's standard terms for foreign investment, as it is customary with foreign businesses from the international community, United States companies for petroleum will be welcome in Venezuela, and that should be a great topic of conversation between President Maduro and Special Envoy Rich Grenell. Deportation flights from the United States continue arriving on time from Texas and other immigration detention centers across the United States into Maiquetía Airport in Caracas. So in that respect, there is still a small window of opportunity of dialogue and cooperation between Venezuela and the United States. Several United States senators, in addition to the legislation proposed by the House of Representatives, they are all expressing concern on United States' recent activities regarding the Caribbean and Venezuelan ships, as all those procedures do not follow international law and provoke repudiation in United States public domestic opinion. It looks like Venezuelans will be able to breathe. It seems that the worst is over, and we look forward to negotiations that might remove United States military out of the Caribbean, which will be appreciated by the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. Every day, Venezuela continues receiving strong diplomatic and military support from our huge allies Iran, China, and Russia, and the features of drones and anti-missile shields for Caracas and Venezuela are state-of-the-art, and by this time the United States military has been adequately informed that Venezuelan military response in case the United States dares to shoot first would cause a severe harm to United States assets and military personnel. It is necessary to de-escalate. Venezuela and the United States should resume their business, petroleum deals pursuant to legislations of both United States and Venezuela for the benefit of the international community. Benjamin Netanyahu has been formally issued an arrest warrant by the United Nations. Countries such as Egypt and Turkey have already planned, along with Saudi Arabia, a strategy to convey 50 countries of the Arab world for responding to Israel's aggression into Qatar and potential future aggression from Israel to anywhere else in the Middle East. However, it is too soon to assess the reach of such recent summit deals. And Russia, of course, continues gaining ground in both Ukraine and Poland, as NATO is not clear on what would be the best way to surrender. This planet is changing. Wars in all fronts show signs of being exhausted, and this reminds us of the final stages of Hitler in World War II, when he was completely surrounded by the Allies and the Nazi regime, which acted very much like Netanyahu and Trump act against their enemies, and perhaps a new world order could emerge sooner rather than later, with an allied victory against the Nazis of our time that are Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. In this new multipolar world, the Caribbean sphere of influence will need to be a zone of peace, but adequately armed with weapons, not only from the United States, but mostly from China, India, and Iran, which have the advantage of being used without asking permission to the seller. The United States weapons industry will probably endure financial hardship as countries around the world will progressively cancel contracts, as we see that military purchases from the United States have strings attached. Venezuela was an early victim of such United States prohibition of purchasing spare parts for our F-16 fighter jets that were purchased in the 1980s. And as it became increasingly clear that Venezuela would not find spare parts for previously acquired F-16 ships, Venezuela had to expel the United States military attaché from Caracas and start its dealings with the Russian, Chinese, and Iranian military. Venezuelan F-16s continue being operated as the Russians have found a way to produce alternative spare parts for such F-16s. During the foreseeable future, Venezuela will continue privileging its military sector because we know very well that Donald Trump's agenda is peace through strength, and Venezuela wants peace, needing strength, and the United States will not provide us any strength. There are several Venezuelans in a bad mood because they wanted Venezuela to be invaded, and there are also citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Jamaica, and other Caribbean islands who also think United States would protect them and they would encourage a war against Venezuela. While Venezuela, as it has been said plenty of times, would prefer to conduct the Dragon gas field operations along with Trinidad and Tobago in Gulf of Paria, and Venezuela would like to build an Essequibo refinery with Guyana near Ana Regina so that crudes from Orinoco Belt and Stabroek can be refined. Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana need huge bonds of friendship and common geopolitical strategies so that our Caribbean sphere of influence can compete in the best conditions economically against the rest of the world. A strong Caribbean will be respected by China, Russia, Iran, and the United States. In Venezuela, there has been a call from Jesuit president of Andrés Bello Catholic University that the Venezuelan government should dialogue with the people who are asking for invasion. This call understandably comes from a religious figure, but it cannot be tolerated because anyone in any country who asks for invasion of their own homeland, are traitors of the homeland, and they should be applied penalties provided on Articles 128 through 143 of Venezuelan Penal Code. Something similar has happened in Brazil, where President Lula da Silva was describing that former President Jair Bolsonaro, who is right now at the hospital with skin cancer, has been applied a prison penalty of 27 years because he also committed the crime of treason to the homeland, as he has tried to overthrow legitimate Brazil government. A similar judgment remains pending in the United States, as there were also government overthrow activities in the United States in the year 2020 that to this day have not been appropriately prosecuted.